Today we are discussing 2 keys to mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is the other half of our practice. Meditation is what we just did, sitting in silence, allowing all of the different thoughts and stories and experiences and sensations that flood our being to just kind of settle. Just all these pulls from all the different worlds that we are involved in. When we just sit and allow ourselves to be, all of that kind of continues to swirl around, but there's a stillness within, and we touch into that. As we go deeper into meditation, something even more interesting happens, is the structures that we have built up over time that help us organize who we think we are and how we think the world is. All of that, the glue holding those together, starts to melt in the light of meditation. And if you're expecting that to happen, that can be really wonderful. If you're not, it can be very terrifying. So that's your fair warning. Meditation will cause these internal, subtle, energetic structures to start to melt. And this is what we do in self-discovery. This is what we do on the spiritual path, is we are reaching beyond what we think we know. And we're touching into all that we are, which is really beyond description. But as I said, it can be a little terrifying. So we have this other half of the practice that we call mindfulness. And it's technically meditation, but it's a moving meditation. It's what we do when we're not sitting still on the meditation cushion, is we have this practice of mindfulness, which in its simplest definition, you could say mindfulness means to be fully present and aware of everything that's happening without any mental filters. It's easy, right? Just go do that. But to go from being completely inundated and entrapped and enamored by all your stories and all these structures that you've created that have kept you feeling safe, because our brain is wired to think that whatever is familiar is safe. And there's a certain logic to that, because you've survived. You're alive. So therefore, if it's familiar, it's safe because it didn't kill you. Brain logic. It's very, very simple. But it's not always helpful, because even though something is familiar, it can create intense suffering and intense pain. So this is what drives many people away from the spiritual path. And it's also what drives people to the spiritual path, ironically. Because we reach a point of suffering so intensely that we finally scream, enough. I need to change, or this needs to change. There must be more. So the way beyond that suffering is awareness. It's allowing these structures, these internal structures that are holding you in place, holding your perception in a certain view, allowing those to melt. But then we still need to function. in the world. We're still living in these bodies. We're still in relation with one another. So we have this wonderful practice of mindfulness that has many different avenues or techniques or tools that you can use to become fully present and embodied and being fully aware of everything that's happening within your body and around your body and in the world. The very first step, which I've already said, is very simple. It's just pay attention. It's just learning to be present and watching your mind. And if you've never done that before in a very intent way, where you're consciously choosing to be aware of these different thoughts that are arising, these different feelings, these different sensations, it can feel a little overwhelming. I've had people come to me and say, before I meditated, I never thought so much. And it's like, yes, dear, you did. You just weren't aware of how much you were thinking. So don't be surprised, as you start to sit every day in daily practice, and then throughout the rest of the day, you start paying attention to your mind. And you might notice, like, whoa, did I really just have that thought? Is that really what I think? And many times these things just pop up in our head and then they disappear. And sometimes they're not even our thoughts. So that's another class we'll talk about. But just to be aware of, not every thought you think is yours. But to start with, I want to give you 2 keys into mindfulness, 2 different avenues that are available to you no matter what state you find your mind in. So as you start to pay attention, you might notice that maybe something didn't go the way that you planned. Maybe something horrific has just happened and you're just full of anger and you're spinning out and you're about to lash out, but you're paying attention. And you're like, whoa, there's a lot of anger in my head right now. And in that moment of awareness, make sure you congratulate yourself. It sounds really funny to say, like, I'm really pissed off right now. But know that you're angry. Because many of the people out there, and maybe even many times in your own life, you've been really angry and not aware of it. And then what happens is we lash out and we hurt somebody or we hurt ourselves. So just the fact that you're aware of it is cause for a huge celebration. So give yourself props for whatever mind state you find yourself in, especially if it's, what I call the gutter states, where you're full of anger or rage or despondency, sorrow, filled with desire and just wanting, filled with fear. Those states that just suck the energy right out of us. And you wind up kind of having this buzz as you're going through it, but then all of a sudden it levels off and you just find yourself exhausted. So when you find yourself in one of those states, don't be afraid to look at it and just be with it for a moment. Congratulate your awareness, like, oh yes, I'm aware. But then you can choose one of these 2 keys to help you get out of it. Because that's a really cool thing about the mind, is it's not fixed. It creates this very visceral illusion that when you're in a mind state, that this is how it's always been. it's part of the feature of the story line of the mind. Like, have you ever read a book or watched a movie and you're just so engrossed in it that for a moment you forgot, and then all of a sudden, like, the phone rings or somebody opens the door and you're like, whoa! And it just jars you out because you were so in it. That's what every single mind state is like. There's a part of our brain that just convinces us, it creates this sense of continuity. Again, safety. Because if we know that we can be in any of the 10,000 mind states like that, any moment, just flip, 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 flip right through them all, that's a little scary for most people. It's a little overwhelming. So our brain creates this sense of continuity. So if you're trapped in anger, then that's just how life is. This is how it's always been. What are you talking about? There is no other way to be. And you'll be completely convinced that is just how life is. And there's this interesting feedback loop that happens because you're in the state of anger. Your mind will create a filter, so you'll notice all the things in life that make you angry. And then so you'll have this perfect confirmation that you can then point out to all your friends who will agree with you and say, yes, life should be angry. Look at all these reasons why you should be angry. It's good to have a sense of humor, by the way. You need to be able to laugh at yourself. If you're going to survive on this path that I'm sharing with you, you need to develop your sense of humor. But back to the 2 keys. So here we are, you're angry, you're just about to rage, but then you're like, oh wait, that lady said, pay attention and I have a choice. And there's 2 powerful keys, and you can pick one. And sometimes it's easier to pick one over the other. And those 2 are beauty or gratitude. So if you're in a state of anger, borderline rage, it's really hard to feel gratitude. For most people, I think gratitude, when you're filled with just anger, and everything in life is conspiring to just make you more and more angry, it's really hard to reach into gratitude from there. But fortunately, we also have beauty. Beauty is very interesting because it exists like gratitude in every single mind state that is possible. But our definition of beauty changes depending on the mind state that we're in. Because there is, what we might call dark beauty, where it's just this, it might be the way that the light is sucked into a cave that creates a certain beauty to it that you can appreciate only when you're in these darker mind states. There might be shattered glass on the sidewalk and the light's just hitting it in a certain way. And you might feel the pain of that glass breaking, and there's a certain beauty in that you might not appreciate if you're already in a bright, happy state. You might like the sparkles of the light, but you don't feel the intensity of this splatter against the wall. So when you notice, or when you consciously choose to look for the beauty in the middle of your anger, don't judge what you think is beauty. Because there's a weird little backlash that happens. Like, oh, how can I think that's beautiful? But just allow yourself to embrace the beauty that you see. And what happens if you keep your focus on the beauty? The mind dissolves into it. And all of a sudden there's just beauty. So like, I'll give you an example from a really long time ago when I was going through a certain circle of hell. And I was just, crying, the tears were just pouring, and everything sucked. I was in just immense physical pain. I couldn't do anything. Life is falling apart. There was just anger and sorrow and just, and then of course I had to pee. So I'm like, so I go and then wash my hands and I look in the mirror. And then I just saw my eyes. And then I could see into my eyes. And there was just this depth and beauty inside my own eyeballs. And it was like just transformative. Because there is like, it's like this total ugliness, all the tear-stained face and the hair all over the place. Pajamas all wrinkled up. But yet there was this beauty. And then so I just dove into it. And there's this weird split that happens in your brain. Because remember, what is familiar is safe to the brain, right? And then here's this experience of beauty, like staring me in the mirror, literally. And I was just like, well, screw it. I already know what the current state feels like. So what does this feel like? And so I just dove into it. And it was this complete dissolution of all the states happened. And I was able to hold on to that sense of beauty. It didn't change anything in my physical life. That still was all had to been deal with. Still had to deal with all that. But then when I turned away from the mirror and looked around my house, and it's like I started to appreciate other things that were beautiful. Like I had some nice artwork on the wall. And it's like, oh, I haven't really looked at that picture in a really long time. And then, the little statue things that I have, the little, my CDs. Yes, I still have CDs. And so one thing after another, it's like, oh, that's beautiful too, and that's beautiful too. And then I see my kitty cat, and of course she's just all gorgeous. But I couldn't appreciate it until I flipped into that state of beauty. And this is possible for everyone at any time. So beauty is this very powerful key into mindfulness, because what it does is it just stops all the storylines. Because before, when I was bawling my eyes out, I had all the stories of how my body and life and everything and all these dreams and schemes and ideas of who I thought I should be running through my head. But then when you dive into the world of beauty, there's no room for that. There's just beauty. And allow yourself to be fully immersed by it. And this shift happens. If you're paying attention, now the first 1,000 times you do this, you probably won't notice when it happens. You'll just kind of feel a little better. You're like, oh, okay, the rage has settled. Maybe I'm just got a little simmer going on, but oh, that's pretty, darn it. I want to be angry, but oh, I kind of like that picture over there. Yeah. And then so you kind of feel a little better and you're a little more present and you're able to look around like, oh yeah, I need to wash those dishes. All right, I can do that. Or I need to respond to that message. And you're able to just go on with your day. But when you've done this enough times where you actually watch the shift happen, because it's very subtle, it's immensely powerful. Now, this works the same way with gratitude. And I said some states are easier to access beauty, other states are easier to access gratitude. Like, if you're full of fear, it's really hard to find beauty. Because everything is like, like your nervous system gets turned up on high and everything, makes you very jumpy. And it's just hard to appreciate the beauty. But gratitude is there because you can be like, I can breathe. Okay, I'm breathing really fast. But look, I'm breathing. And then you settle into that sense of being grateful for taking in that breath or for having a place to just sit. It can be very simple things that you feel gratitude for. Or every time I see that show where they're house hunting in Alaska, I feel such gratitude for indoor plumbing. Which here in our spoiled Western world and the continental states sounds ridiculous, but you see these people that like live in houses where they get 10 feet of snow and they have an outhouse. It's just like, whoa, I'm so grateful for my warm water coming out of my faucet. So if you're in the state of fear where you're just feeling that anxiety bubble up and pour over you, you can use this key of gratitude. And the same way is you latch your mind onto it. And you just keep holding on to gratitude. And it's very much like in meditation. When we sit, we focus. So we pick a focal point and we put our attention on it. Things come up and distract us and pull our attention away. But we've already decided I'm going to sit, so I'm going to pull my attention back and focus. With either of these two keys, it's the same principle. You become aware of the state that you're in, and you're like, okay, this is not happy fun time. So let me see, is there any beauty available or is there any gratitude available? And whichever one it is, you focus on it. And then, of course, the stories will come up, the reasons will come up, the very logical ideas of why you should stay in the state that you're in. Again, familiar is safe. So that's the brain's telling you, well, let's just stay where we are because we're not dead. So you just keep returning your focus over and over to either beauty or gratitude. And it's interesting because you don't want to turn it into this battle of wills, because that's exhausting. Nobody wants to do that. Instead, think of it more like a game. You gotta kind of gamify your mind. It's like, all right, the reasons all took over and pulled me back into the low gutter. So let me just throw out my attention out to grab the hold of that beauty or that gratitude. And let me see, can I hold on to it for 1 second? And then boom, no, I'm got knocked out again. All right, I'm going to get back up and I'm going to focus. And hold it for 10 seconds. And boom, I get knocked down. And let me see, can I get up faster this time? So that's another variation of the game. It's not, at first it might be, well, can I hold on to it for 1 second or 10 seconds or a minute? But once you're up to the, 30 seconds, 1 minute, even 10 seconds, switch up the game and see, well, how fast can I turn it around? How fast I get knocked down into the gutter. So, all right, I've been here for 10 seconds, a minute, 10 minutes, an hour. How fast can I turn it around? And then, okay, I've been there an hour. Let me flip. And then, okay, I'm back up and now I'm down. And then time passes and you're like, oh, wait, I've been here for 30 minutes. Let me see, can I flip it around? And so now the game becomes, how fast can you switch back up? I think my teacher used the metaphor of playing tennis. So the low mind state ball gets thrown in your court and you're just like, oh, here's my racket. Knock it out. Here's some beauty and gratitude. I'm just going to focus on that. And then, boom, the brain sends back in the reasons. No, you should feel crappy. And you're like, nope, I'm going to feel good. And so we just go back and forth. And when you've done this enough times, like I said, this subtle shift happens. So you might be playing this game, throwing it back and forth, and then as you're doing it, your mind state suddenly shifts, and so you're no longer in the gutter, but you just feel kind of neutral, like everything's workable. When you've done this, 1,000 times maybe, there might come this day where you're able to pay attention through the entire process. And you'll actually notice that, wow, I actually moved my mind from this gutter into this very bright and happy place. And when that happens, own it. Because that is tremendously powerful. And then you might not notice that you have done it again for a long time, but you know that you did it once. And so you keep, so that becomes the new game. It's like, oh, can I pay attention to actually my mind shifting during that actual shift? Because that is a certain type of power. The ability to move our perception from one filter and being able to install an entirely different filter. It's like being able to take your sunglasses and put them on, and take your sunglasses and take them off. And the world looks completely different when you're wearing your sunglasses versus when you're not. And that's all that we're doing when we're shifting our mind with these two keys. It sounds really simple and easy to talk about, but actually doing it and incorporating it into your day-to-day life, that's where practice comes into play. This is why we call it meditation and mindfulness practice. Because it's something that we continue to do over and over and over and over and over again. And each time we do it, we are refining our practice. We're getting better at it. If you stick with it for the long haul, what happens is your baseline actually changes. So everyone has a certain baseline vibration or baseline mind state through which they experience life. And so we all, go up and down. Really happy, really sad, really happy, really crappy, really happy, really crappy. And these ups and downs always happen to everybody. I don't care, how enlightened you are. The ups and downs, are just part of the roller coaster of life. You're breathing and have a body, states come and go. But between those two, there's a baseline where is your typical normal, where you don't feel super elated, you don't feel super down. It's just your basic everyday state, your default mode, when you're really not, nothing great happened, nothing bad happened. Default. So what happens over time is your default mode might be, kind of, let's say at a 1. And it's just kind of, you're just going along. And then you start to meditate. And then you rise up. Your awareness just expands all the way up to a 10. And everything's great. And then you get off the meditation cushion. You go out to your kitchen. And the dishes are dirty because your roommate didn't wash them. So boom, now you're down to a -6. But then you do your mindfulness practice and you come back up. And you're back up, you maybe now achieved a 7. And then it just goes forward throughout the day like that. And then in the evening, you meditate again. And you practice your mindfulness, you go to sleep. And then after many weeks, your default starts to climb. And then all of a sudden, you might not even notice. You only notice because maybe you've been doing journaling. And then you happen to pick up an old journal from 6 months ago and you look at it and you're like, whoa, I was living at a 1. And now I'm like at a 3. And then it just keeps going up like that. So now the downs that you experience aren't quite as low because your baseline is higher. There's always exceptions where you really go far down, but because you've created this new baseline, when you just naturally rise back up. So that's kind of the long-term view of why we put so much emphasis on these 2 keys, this basic practice of entering into mindfulness through either beauty or gratitude. So I hope you'll put those into use. And I would like to meditate some more before we run out of time. So we'll do some chakra meditation. So again, we want to focus, but don't force. So it's just a very relaxed awareness where we focus in on first the navel center, right below your belly button. Then during the second song, we'll focus in on the heart. And then the third song, we'll focus on the third eye. So I'll put on some zazen music. And we will try that out.